This is Laserlight Presents All About the Gig. All right, we are back. Episode 11. So, for all you listeners out there, we have breached 10 episodes, which we are very excited about. Today, of course, we have, again, as usual, we have Dave and Devin in the house. We're going to look forward now. We're going to look ahead. We're going to talk about advanced and active gigging musicians. We're going to talk about interests that may lie with where we are today. We're in June. We're in 2021, and things are happening. Things are opening back up. We're going to talk about frequency. We're going to talk about pursuits. We're going to talk about how to make sure that you're getting back into the rhythm. You need to get out there. You need to get heard. You need to get paid, and you need to get back to it. So, right, with this theme, we're gonna push forward, and we're gonna start with. We're going to take, for instance, where Dave and Devin are, collectively in joined groups, joined efforts, individually, where they're at with their own projects and their own pursuits of where to go next. You know, they're saturating the immediate geography, even tonight, the trio that they are with Brad Bilbar. They're going to head up to Detroit and start doing some prospecting. So, guys, welcome back.
Thanks for having us.
Let's just kick it off. Let's talk about where you're headed today after we put some time into the studio. You guys have a little bit of a nomadic search, if you will, right? You're headed up north. Mm-hmm. And why Detroit? I think that's where you're headed, right?
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
Detroit, interesting pick, right? There's Ann Arbor, there's Detroit, there's all those different cities, Somerset, there's different venues, different interests, different, if you will, people who are going out to eat, going out to party, going out to do whatever. Yeah. We're starting in Detroit. Why is that? Go ahead, Devin.
Yeah, I mean, first off is obviously the logistical idea that, it's 45 minutes from my house to get to downtown Detroit. So when we're talking about places that you're willing to drive for kind of standard gig rates, it's like, we're willing to do that, especially coming from a smaller city like Toledo, where you can exhaust the venues somewhat in a city like ours. So a city like Detroit, which has a bit of a larger population, also has quite a few well-populated suburbs who all go into the city at night and hit a lot of clubs and a lot of bars and venues that actually has a pretty fervent music scene. And not to mention all the people who come in, they're happy to drive from Ann Arbor or Ypsi or Dundee, all these other small places that will also drive into a city like that for a pretty lively night scene. So, it's just one more docket for us to kind of add to it that we haven't broken into heavily in the past. We've done some gigs back there in 2018, 2019, but like we've said in previous weeks, in a lot of ways, the pandemic kind of was a hard reset for everyone. So it doesn't really matter where you played before. Yeah. So, now we're going back up there to do our prospects again. And all these satellite cities, big and small around us, those are all viable options. Anything that's within what you say, like hour and a half range, probably. Oh yeah, it's like those are kind of our standard hits for weekdays and even weekend gigs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So what you're putting in and what the return is. Yeah. Dave, this trio with you and Devin and Brad, this is the 20.
It goes by a few different names depending on who's booking it.
I love it.
Under my moniker, yes. The band is called 2024.
Okay.
And that was the practice room at the University of Toledo where we all kind of like met each other and started playing together in a real sort of way. So it just seemed fitting to kind of give it the namesake after that room. Yeah. But anyways, so this particular group does a little bit of everything. Obviously we do jazz trio stuff, we'll do power trio rock, we'll do funk fusion, dance tunes, top 40s, just about anything. And the plan for this group was always to be able to expand. If the money's right and I can find the cats, I'd love to get a keyboard in on certain nights, make it a quartet, maybe add a horn player, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, and just be able to add to it. And as it expands further and further, it's important to make sure that we keep reaching out regionally to expand our presence and to make our names known in some of these other cities.
Yeah.
And Detroit is a great city because it has so much music going on. There's so much
Oh,
good
I was just going to say.
So
And
much
a
good
long
music.
history of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what is your approach? So, hey, we're heading up, and for this group, and it's dynamic. Where are you starting? Like, are you hitting what type of venues that would want what type of music? What's your let me even go further to say, tonight you're heading up, but what did you do in preparation for where you're going to go?
We scouted some venues online to make sure
Based on their
where they're at, what acts have played there. That's a big one. Is like seeing like who has played there, what kind of music do they typically like, and then part of it's also like trying to see, is this going to be an appropriate venue for us? Because this particular project is not very original music heavy, so we don't necessarily want to break into the original music scene of Detroit at this particular junction. But what we're trying to do is be able to bring our craft and our art form, playing, jazz standards, and, pop, blues, rock, all that good stuff to any of these venues that might be looking for that. So we did some research. We looked up some of the venues that might be, hiring and doing stuff. And it's quite literally cold calling. We'll walk in there. We'll ask if the booking manager is working that night. We'll grab a drink. We'll hang out. And best case scenario, we talk to them, leave a card, get their information, and follow up the next day via email.
Best case scenario, they book you for a gig on the spot to at least try out. And they'll say, like, if that goes well, we'll talk from there. But sometimes you can get a gig on someone right there.
Yeah.
How are they vetting you? We've talked about in previous casts about do I bring a flash drive and say, hey, this is what we sound like, or do I bring a CD, for the old schools, or do you say, hey, these are our websites or our Facebook pages?
Yes.
Yeah, the first thing I'm looking
how
for
are you
is
how are they vetting you?
You give them your business card that has your website on it. Nobody's going to take the time to plug in a flash drive anymore. Nobody's going to take the time to. I don't even think people have CD players anymore.
I know. I had to say it though. Right? Yeah, but I had to say it. Yeah.
No. That was the preferred method.
Sure,
even 5 years ago.
Here's my demo,
10 years
or
ago.
whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Nowadays, they want to just pull it up on their phone and just listen to it. And sometimes they'll do it right there.
I was just going to say, did they do that right then and there?
Sometimes they will.
Yeah, they will. Yeah. And that's why your website presentation has to be very, very good.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that you have a very good website presentation, because they will sometimes go right to that link. And first impressions matter. How does it look? How is it formatted?
Yeah.
What videos are you leading with?
So you're ready for anything.
Yeah.
Yes.
And best case scenario is often getting the personal cell phone or personal email from whoever's doing the booking. Not the restaurant's email or something like that might get forwarded to them, but you get their personal contacts so that when you leave there, any links you send them, anything that you send them, is going to them. And that has the highest probability of them getting back to you.
And the person doing the booking may not be the owner.
Often not.
It's often
you're
not,
you're going in and you're right. I mean, you're it's an inquisition. So how do we get booked here? It's like your start. Who do you approach? You guys said you're cold calling. So are you going to the bartender?
We'll walk right to the
Are you
bartender.
going to the floor manager? Really?
Yep,
Yeah.
right
Get
to the
that,
bartender.
Get that intel, right? Yeah.
Yep. And they're used to it. I mean, they're typically not taken aback when you come up to them and say, "Hey, we play music that would suit this venue. We were hoping to talk to the booking manager if they're here tonight." And it's as simple as them saying, "Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me go get them." Or they're not in tonight. Here's their information. I've never once had a bartender just straight up be like, "Don't talk to me." They'll try and help you. They'll be like, here's some information.
Yeah, here's some
especially
insight.
if you're friendly.
That's always been my experience.
Yeah, if you're friendly and you order a drink or something like that, then the conversation starts.
Yeah.
But you have to be tactful about it. If you walk into a bar that is packed to the gills, and it's very much obvious that the bartender is struggling. Yeah, if they're struggling to keep up, that might not be the best time to approach them.
And at that time, you might be just lucky enough to throw them a card and just say like, well, that at least I put something in the water.
Sure.
They're probably not going to respond. We probably have to come back on another day. But, I'd rather give something than nothing. So,
So if you come into that scenario and they're, the bartender is just absolutely, burdened.
Yeah, if there's
you don't just quickly, hey man, who's the manager? Hey man, you don't take advantage of I made the effort to be here and who do I need to talk to next type thing?
Not always.
If you can, yes, but the last thing you want to do is look like you're pushy, because if you're
you don't want to look desperate.
Yeah,
either.
if you're like pushing them, even if the manager's there, they might behind the scenes go get them, be like, there's some dude that's like really pushy asking to talk to you. I don't know who this guy is.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that your outward persona is always relaxed, calm, and very respectful.
And you want them to want to hire you. You don't want them to you don't want them to think that you're desperate to get to play there. You're like, look,
I'm here for the gift.
You want me. You want me to play here.
Right.
And I'm here to present the fact that you want me to play here. So
Cool. So where are you headed? What are the targets? Are you looking at some blues? Are you looking at some funk? Are you looking at some all out
Little bit of
covers
everything.
for fun?
A little bit of everything, honestly. We'll probably end up on the main drag.
What's that?
Like right when you go into the downtown Detroit area, there's it's kind of like by the Hard Rock Cafe, by the Fist. All the venues around there are always hiring upscale entertainment.
Huh. So down is that not the drag where the Fox Theater is and the State Theater? That's a totally different area.
It's near there. Yeah, it's what is that? Woodward and
I don't know the streets. I'm such a millennial.
Yeah.
I follow my GPS to my parking
so
space.
you guys are closer to like the ProMedica or
yeah. But yeah, we have
our pizza's here. So tonight's pursuit, you guys are heading up north. You've done a little research. You're thinking about where you're going to go, what would be theme oriented, how you can fit that pocket. I'm assuming you're probably looking at some blues spots, some funk spots, some combo spots, maybe even some wide range, dance, fun, background filler, right? So where are you headed? What's going on tonight?
Absolutely. Well, like in respect to like when you're asking us about like what venues we were picking, one of the things I did is I looked at like Detroit's Blues Society and other gigs and like historic blues events because, for instance, my trio out of the three groups is slightly more focused on power trio, classic rock, fusion, things like that. But at the same time, I'm happy to, when we go to like jazz clubs, Brad's group tends to be more oriented into the jazz scene. And then maybe some more of the upscale places, even though one of us could also do it, Dave's group 2024 tends to be more oriented as an event band, which is great because even though the three of us can all substitute each other's groups and we can make it work, of course, same three players, we can always change up the song lineup and such, but it does make it a little easier for us to kind of flip a coin and say, okay, you take lead on this gig, you take lead on this venue. And when we get to a venue that kind of fits all three of us, it's like, well, you got the last one, so why don't you give them your card this time? And just try and make it as fair as we can, of course. But
so your
also
trio is the Devin Kruger trio.
The Kruger
right?
trio. And then
or the Kruger trio.
Yeah.
And then what's Brad's, what's he promoting?
Sometimes it's the Brad Billmeyer trio. Sometimes it's the Brad Billmeyer quartet. Just depends on who he has with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there for everybody. Yeah.
At one point in time, he had a blues group called Urban Legend. I don't know if he's still pursuing that or not, but at one point he was doing that.
Yeah. So you back to Devin. You were saying you pick that venue. You say you take the lead. We're the supporting cast.
Exactly.
We'll be here. Right. Yeah. That's awesome. That's
so
awesome.
we do a rotating thing where all of us are band leaders and all of us lead the group in different iterations, and each of our groups has a slight specialization, which allows for each person to say, why don't you take point on this venue? And we'll back you up. We'll be your wingmen. And, next venue is your venue, switch players around, and now we support that person. And just as a small side note for everyone out there because we're talking about professionalism today and like going up to the next level, one of the cool things about Dave's project as well is that his group doesn't have his name in it, unlike Brad and I's. And there's a very good reason for that, which is kind of like the wedding groups and corporate groups that we play with already. He has the ability to eventually, if he gets enough good players, book that group without him being there.
Two places at once.
Yeah. So
I've done it once.
yeah, that's the real goal of a true event band, is to outgrow it to the point where you can book your band in multiple places with all players that you trust, and then you're taking a fee for booking fees and things like that, of course, and growing that project out.
So Brad's paying for everything tonight, right?
I'll let him know.
It was said here first.
Yeah.
We'll tell him all about the gigs that you got the
Brad.
first round.
Oh my
Right,
God,
right.
dude. What a keepsake. Okay.
That's funny.
Okay, so someone says yes. And they say yes to one of the formulas. Now what? You have to put together a set list.
Sometimes
appropriate,
put
yeah.
together a band, even sometimes.
Sure.
Depending on if
Right.
maybe we booked a gig because me and Devin were available, but Brad was not. It's actually very common.
Yeah,
That
they'll tell you the dates. Like, okay, man,
Yeah.
fine. I heard what you did or whatever,
Yeah.
and they're in. And then
Yeah.
they say, this is what's
and
up.
I will book a date if I personally am available, and then I will retroactively then find a band.
Yeah.
I won't make sure my band is ready to go before booking the date, because even though I have first, second, third calls, I don't mind going down my list, and that's what keeps it fresh. Is I'm playing with new guys sometimes, and that's cool.
And that has been a tricky thing for us during COVID, only because this was the only time where we had to be very careful about booking each other's bands back to back at certain venues, because we didn't want them to think we were taking advantage of the fact that we had multiple names and the same 3 people showed up. And we had to kind of be aware that we didn't want to look like that, because during normal times, even though we might be each other's first calls, we're normally never this available. Because normally I can't make it to every single 24 gig. And Dave cannot make it to every Kruger Trio gig. In fact, this Friday's finally proving that, because we're finally getting to the point where it's happened. I'm doing a Kruger Trio gig with a group I've never had together again, and we're putting it together to do it that way.
Very cool.
And 2024 has a different guitar player that particular evening.
And, those things, as time goes on and schedules get more filled, the likelihood of us actually having true pollination like that, where it's the same group back to back, becomes way less of a problem. And then we don't have a problem where if he gets an in on a bar today, then that means in the next 6 months to a year, I'm going to try and get my group in there, and he's my foot in the door. So we're not really helping each other out, being wingmen for each other's gigs, because we know each other will book each other.
Hey,
but we
did you
also
know?
know that that's our foot in the door to get our own group in there.
Yeah.
And as times go back to normal, that won't seem so silly where it's the same 3 people with different names, because truthfully, we rarely actually have this trio together every week.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Yep.
Have you guys, is next stop Ann Arbor? I mean, what
we
are
play
some of
in
the
Ann Arbor.
hot spots?
Yeah.
What are some of the hot spots? So you're going to hit Detroit.
Yeah,
You're going to try to
so-
get some bookings. And are there other spaces and places in Michigan that you're thinking about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And each and every city specializes in certain things.
Oh.
So Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, they are a huge art scene. Now, they do a lot of other stuff. Like, it's not just that, but like if you have like a jazz collective and you are trying to play some more avant-garde music that's a little bit more art music oriented, that is a great spot, going up to Ypsi and going up to Ann Arbor, because there's a lot of outlets for that.
How would you describe art music? What's that?
Music for the sake of art, meaning that you are not trying to push an agenda of crowd pleasing. You're not trying to play top 40s. You're not trying to do
So
anything.
not covers or still covers? But
No, not covers at all.
Not
No,
covers
this
at
is
all.
your original
Interesting.
art. This
And
is an
interesting.
artistic
like
piece.
some
Yeah.
fusion work.
And
or
if
something.
anything is a cover, it is a cover because the artist wants to do something. It is not about pandering to an audience.
Yeah.
It's the idea that
Yeah.
you're expecting musicians to be at the peak of whatever they are, performing whatever it is that they want to perform, and people want to go and experience whatever that is.
And that's
Wow.
it thrives very, very much in Ann Arbor because it's a college town, and college musicians are very drawn to that.
Yeah.
And of course, it does exist in other areas too. It exists in Toledo to a certain degree. But Ann Arbor is really good for that. But it doesn't stop there. There's also, we used to play at this venue right downtown, right on Main Street or
Something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Right on the main drag
Yeah.
of Ann Arbor. And this place was super cool. They had a barbecue, like delicious food up top, and then the basement was a brewery and a whiskey bar, and they did live music down there. So we were playing, like blues, rock, funk, cover music, but they very much enjoyed improvisation. So we really got, even though it was a pop gig, we got to stretch and really improvise and like actually have some fun with it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, like a corporate gig where you're expected to play the song to the recording and then done.
Yeah.
We actually got to stretch, and that was really cool. So each and every town across, Michigan, Ohio, anywhere really, it varies in degree of like what kind of music they want, So Detroit is looking typically for a little bit different styles of music than Ann Arbor, which is going to be different from Kalamazoo, which will be different from, even right here across the border in Toledo.
Yeah.
So it's good to keep branching out regionally to try and get your brand to all these different cities, all these different markets. And that really closely starts to tie in with the concept of touring too.
Let's dip back into, which I know listeners we've covered a few times, but it's a hot topic and we're in the stride. So let's speak to, are you giving these venues your dates? Two-part question. Are you giving these venues your avails, or are you asking for their avails? And secondly, how do you bring up money?
Mm-hmm.
So what's up?
I'll take a stab first.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first thing with dates is it can be like a double-edged sword, because at one end, I want to let them know these are the kind of dates I'm looking for. These are the availabilities I have. For instance, like Dave doesn't have a free Saturday or Sunday. I'm sorry, Sunday. Free Friday or Saturday until like November. And I don't
Or
have
a Monday.
Yeah. And I don't have a free Saturday till November either. But I have a handful of Fridays. So I have to keep in mind that if I'm booking with these places on Fridays, I've lost my first choice of bass. And to be honest, my second choice bass is also a very busy guy. So there's a very high likelihood that I don't have him either. So I'm going to be slightly wary about booking on Fridays. So I'm going to probably preface it with like, I'm looking for weekday hits. Like, I bet you the people that you have come during the weekday aren't as good as our band. We could come in and kill it. We are a Friday, Saturday band that wants to be here on a Wednesday. Like, I know you can't.
like that.
I know you can't
like
pay
that.
me Friday, Saturday prices, but if you can meet me at this price, and I'm not going to sit there and bottom out for them, because part of it is I want them to take us seriously. So we're aiming high, let them talk you down from there. But part of that is saying like, we're all accomplished players who are already playing a lot, and we're trying to fill out our schedule, and you would be lucky to have us on a Wednesday. Like, it'd be great to have us.
Again, hopefully taking advantage of them on the spot.
Yep.
Visiting some examples from your site. or
Exactly.
something. Yeah.
And hopefully, if we get to the point in the conversation where maybe I've buttered them up enough to be like, okay, let's actually talk some dates.
Yeah.
Once they know what I'm looking for, even if I said no Friday or something like that, then they're going to open their calendar and be like, okay, July 25th, that's a Friday. Can you do that one? And we'll look at each other and be like, can't do that one. He's like, what about the Thursday after?
Yeah.
We can do that one. And they'll go, if they feel confident about you, they might book you out to the end of the year. Unlikely right now. Likely is they'll get you in for that first gig. You go and do that gig, and then they'll open up their calendar for the rest of the year and probably try and book you for a once a month throughout the end of the year.
Sure. Now, would it be strange for someone to, in this type of scenario, to be so prepared that they have either their phone with headphones, earbuds, or a little, like, how can you or should you advance them into a here and now moment? Like, for instance, listen, so being prepared to give them an experience, an audio experience on the spot. Should you rely on them?
I don't.
You know what I'm saying? Like you guys were saying, like, look, here's our site, here's some examples. Should you be forthcoming with, and here's our product?
I've never personally tried that.
Really?
I don't hate that idea. I would have to think about how to finesse that, because that does feel real pushy.
It's intrusive.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Because like
too,
these people are there, they're
Especially if
working.
they're busy.
Yeah, they're doing
yeah,
stuff,
Yeah.
Now, if they're interested, they're like, do you have something we can listen to?
But if it's 3 or 3:30,
ideally,
you know what I mean?
yeah, ideally, this kind of ties into modern technology. If you have a new enough phone, your speakers are actually pretty good nowadays.
Okay.
Phone speakers are not horrible. And your recording should sound good through a phone. If your recordings don't sound good through a phone, you need better recordings.
Yeah.
So, unfortunate. I mean, that's what we're mixing to anymore is making sure things sound good from small phone speakers.
Yeah, and I like to Devin's point, you're there personifying you need us. You know, so it's not a question of being so needy that you're just like listen, see, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I get it. And it was just a curious question because I know
that's an
years
interesting
ago
thought.
that's what we would do. You know, years ago we would be like, so, you know, not to take up more of your time, but here's 90 seconds of what we're talking about. And these, you know, these individuals, obviously week over week over week over week, can hear immediately whether someone is just hot cross bunsing it or, you know what I mean, or delivering a product that's worthy of more attention.
And if you're lucky right now, some of these places just opened up a couple weeks ago and they're just now trying to fill out their whole calendar. And the thing is, they're trying to do it immediately. So some of these places will drag you into the back room, which is great. And they'll be like, come to my office and let's talk there. It's too loud out here.
That's so cool.
And at that point, then they might say like, oh, pull up your phone. Let me hear something. And now that you're in an environment that doesn't have a whole bar worth of people talking and background music, maybe a band already. Probably not. It's Monday. But
maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But at the very least,
choice,
then you go
by
into
the
their
way.
office.
Monday's a sweet spot day. That's a good choice because that's probably the most laid back.
It's probably the most laid back. If they have music, it's probably someone with an acoustic guitar up there, and they're just like singing quietly up there. Like we're not going to be bothering most people, and it shouldn't be their busiest night, and we should be able to get a hold of someone to talk to. And I know quite a few venues who specifically say come in on Sunday or Monday, because that's when their booking manager is the most available.
Very, very cool. So, outside of tonight's, you know, pursuit, if you will, things are going well. Things are ramping up. Things are opening up. Right? I mean, you guys are getting everything from weddings to private parties to, you know, to showcase opportunities. You know,
It didn't feel like a ramp up period. It felt
Really?
more like an explosion. It was
that's
like
what- we spoke to that. We predicted that was happening. Yeah, which is very cool.
It went from famine to feast, if you will. It was like one day my schedule had nothing, and then the next week, literally 7 days later, I had almost. I think I have one free Saturday between now and November, or Friday, excuse me. One free Friday between now and November, and one free Saturday.
That's awesome. Good
I'd say
for
the
you
only
guys.
thing lagging right now are some of the local gigs, mostly early week stuff. Like my Tuesday, Wednesdays are still not completely full, and it's getting there. And right now I'm actually happy because I'm using that time to practice other tunes because we're learning a ton of new material right now. But like I used to have a gig every Tuesday. So getting something that fills that kind of a spot that's week to week, all year round, easy paycheck. That hasn't come back just yet. And same thing for like Wednesdays right now is like 2 weeks out of the month. So I haven't filled up those other ones. But, you know, as those start to fill in, it gets to the point where you're back to doing 4 to 5 gigs a week minimum again. But the weekend stuff is crazy because especially doing kind of the corporate and wedding events and all of the like the big celebrations that got pushed off last year, we have all of those this year plus everyone that still wanted to do an event this year.
Nice.
So honestly,
Love it.
Like this is the busiest year I've ever had with that group. Other than getting the weekday stuff back. And, you know,
It's like everybody wants to catch up. You know, like boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, you know,
I
stack
just
it
did,
up.
like, it sounds funny, but I just did my first Sunday wedding that wasn't like a Jewish wedding, which maybe our listeners are thinking like, that doesn't sound like a big of a deal, but it's like, I've done like 150 weddings and I've never done a non-Jewish wedding on Sunday. So I was like, that was a big deal. I was like, that was the only time they could rent the venue.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So
Very
it's like
cool.
people are looking for any spot available.
And talking about like that surplus, because of the pandemic, this particular corporate group had such turnover that so many new people are arriving to it right now, and people are actually starting to get, you know, more of these corporate gigs where they might not have had them before. And it's interesting to see who outlasted the pandemic and who kind of just packed it in and said music's going to be a hobby now, you know.
That's very interesting because that raises the question. Speaking to the corporate angle, how how do corporate venues come into play? I mean, who's the pursuer? Who's the right?
Well, and I can't speak for every group, but like the group we play for, which is an international group and they're enormous. The thing is that that's not my problem, luckily. We have people above us who do all of the pursuing, all of the booking.
Yeah.
They have an entire marketing department who reaches out to cities and such. And a lot of it is word of mouth. You do an event really, really well, especially like, say, a wedding or a corporate party. You do that well. And then their friends, their bridesmaids, the friends of the company, they see that and say, we want that place next time. Like that party was the shit. And like, that's what we want. So hire that group. And like, we hand out a ton of cards. But the thing is, those cards don't have my name on them. They have the person.
It's the umbrella company.
Yeah. They have the people who do the booking for me. They have their information. I only deal with people on the day. Now, in terms of people getting into those groups, that's a whole different thing. And the fortunate, unfortunate thing is, if you haven't heard about them, then you might need to start doing your homework. And if you have heard about them but haven't been asked to be invited yet, then you should also keep doing your homework.
Well, wait, who's them? You're speaking to who's them? If you haven't heard about them,
like any of the groups that do that kind of work. These kind of groups and
pre-designed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing is that what's weird is when you end up getting invited in, and then you start discovering all the other players who are in it. It's like this weird best kept secret of like, you've kind of entered the who's of who of whatever town or city or area you're in.
Sure.
And
have you guys ever tried to do, or, before you were included into these, if you will, these companies, right, that do all the work ahead, have you ever tried to cold call on that?
I did for 2 years.
How does that work? What did you do?
They just ignored us.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't even respond.
Yeah, it's because.
Why do you think they did?
Because they didn't need that person at the time.
Well, wait a minute. Are we talking about? I'm talking about. It's 2024, and we're fresh, and we're active, and we're gigging, but we're thinking to ourselves, let's expand our portfolio and let's try to get some corporate work. That's what I'm talking about? Are you talking? What are you guys talking
as far as I was talking about, get invited into the groups that already do the corporate work.
Yeah.
But in terms of getting the corporate scene, the bands who I know who have made it, it is not the kind of thing you get cold called into. And this is what goes back to that idea of, I don't care if there's one person in the bar or 100 people in the bar. You always put on your best performance. Yeah. Because you never know who's there. The people who get invited to do those $10,000 gigs a night, the reason is because they put on like a hell of a show one day, and someone was there that said, "Hey, I'm throwing the corporate party for GM next month. I'll write you guys a blank check. You should be there." And like, it genuinely can happen like that, and that's what ends up happening.
Yeah.
And I remember a good friend of mine. He said the big thing for him was that they just got done doing a big party, and someone came to them later on and said, "Do you have any original material?" And they said, "No." And the guy's like, "Well, call me when you do."
Oh, geez.
A couple years later,
that's a switch.
A couple years later, someone else does the same thing. "You have any original material?" He said, "Yeah, we'll play for you right now." They do it, and he's like, "Great, we're doing another large corporate event, but they don't want dance bands. They want like original material and such like that." And that does exist somewhere out there. And unfortunately, it's not the kind of thing you can call for because these people's phone numbers aren't available. They're not just on Google. You can't look them up.
Right.
So it's one of those things, again, where it's like you gig as much as you can. You put yourself out in the public as much as you can. You try and make money while doing it to support yourself while doing it. And you give it 110% because you don't know where those opportunities will hit.
Very, very cool. Awesome. Yeah. Again, we're trying to hit those interest levels of people, musicians who are active and who are advanced and, maybe sharing similar experiences as to the narratives that, you guys are conveying, and if we look a little bit into, okay, now you've booked something and you have that commitment, right? And it's a certain genre venue. When does the set list build come in? When does the set list prep come in? And then when, the execution is obviously day of, that's the on-site, the execution. But obviously you guys are advanced, right? And you have your pick of the litter, if you will, and you've got a deep bench, right? So you got first, second, third string players, not to classify people in the sense of talent, but first, second, third players more so in availability. They're all Class A.
Oh, definitely.
Right? Everyone's Class A.
I have quote unquote Class D players that aren't D because they're the fourth worst. They're D because I think they're too busy to play with me most of the time.
Sure.
And by the time I get to them, I'm like, please, are you available?
It's like an anticipated, you know what you probably will get from that request.
Yeah. So like, so often ABC is like who's most available
Yeah.
in that immediate circle too.
Do venues ever coach you towards, well, like you said, you've looked at historic groups that have played there. And you're probably working on an assumptive of what their set list might have been. You're most likely working on an assumptive of what their set list might have been comprised of, like what they probably approached that venue with, unless you found some, YouTube Live, clips or something. What is that process like for deciding what your set list will be? And it must be obviously in accordance to the players that you're.
Well, yeah, the venue will sometimes give you some
Really?
coaching. Yeah. Sometimes they'll be like, we're booking you for this themed party night. So right before COVID, one of the event groups that I play with in the area, we got hired to play an 80s themed party.
Oh, okay.
So they asked for all 80s music. And we had to learn a lot of 80s music because we don't do too much of it, but we have a few. But that does happen. And sometimes it's common sense. If you're going into Kid Rock's Big Honky Tonk, guess what you're playing?
Yeah.
Country.
Yeah. Right.
If you try and go in,
No, you're not playing.
right?
punk?
Yeah,
No.
if you try and go in there and throw
No Ramon covers.
something that's off what that brand is, you best case scenario won't get asked back. Worst case scenario is they'll cut you after the first set. I mean, that can happen.
God.
That certainly can happen.
Holy crap.
So
That would suck.
sometimes, if the venue's doing their homework, which at that point in time they would be, they will book you based around like what they find on your internet. And if you have a diverse portfolio, sometimes they'll say, hey, we really like the top 40s thing. If you could do that, that'd be great. But sometimes, if you're playing at just a general purpose venue, they're going to give you free reign to bring what you think is appropriate to their venue. And if you get there and there's a bunch of people, throwing back beers and getting rowdy, having a good time, that's a much different vibe than if you walk in and it's dim lighting and it's, candlelight steak dinner,
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of crowd reading and venue dependent set lists. Now, as far as time frame to get those set lists out,
2 year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try and get them out a week ahead of time, at least. There has been times where it's like we show up to the gig, and if there's people that I play with often, you can call tunes on the gig.
Yeah.
That's fine sometimes. And with some of those corporate groups where you're playing with a new set of musicians every single week, it's important to try and get it out 5 to 7 days prior to the gig.
And I have to say, personally, not being, being a drummer for a very long time, but not being capable of, I definitely not yet, right, could absorb 2 to 3 sets for an evening of covers, perspective wise. I mean, what's your approach when a group leader says, hey, here's our 3 sets and here's where we're going to go, with these. What's your goal in adapting to that list and saying, I'm going to bring what core rudiment to each of these songs? You're, and I'm just assuming you couldn't possibly be trying to cover it in a tribute manner. And tribute, that can be defined in many ways. When I say tribute, I mean like, a Prince cover band or something. That's a tribute band. But
If The
a
band,
tribute could be also like, here's our version.
if the
right?
band if the band leader sends me a song with no direction, I will learn it verbatim.
Yeah. Normally you learn
Good
it
God.
verbatim and then go from there, because the thing is, I could
Jeez.
learn a song verbatim, and then when I get there, the drummer says, "We're going to do this like it's a samba though." And then I have the backdrop of the real song in my head, and I'm going to interpret it to the way they're playing it. And if you have really good seasoned players, you can do that, and you can change songs on the fly and things. And the thing is that everyone knows that if it push comes to shove, we revert back to the original. But if I can trust everyone to stretch in the right ways,
Yeah.
we can take the song in any direction anyone wants to go, or the band leader wants to take it in. And then we can even say like, hey, this bar seems a little bit more classic rock.
Yeah.
But you know what? I don't feel like learning a bunch of new songs now that we're here.
Yeah.
And I don't have enough classic rock. It's like, what happens if we just rock up some of these songs? And then it just becomes, we're just changing the feel of songs on the fly and see how it goes. And the thing is what's funny to people is they don't realize sometimes how little time players will spend learning a song
Yeah.
when they show up. And it depends on the level. And as you climb up the ladder of professional players,
God.
you actually find that they spend a lot less time learning the songs. In fact, there's been plenty of times I've listened to a song on the way to a venue, and the first time I'm playing it with a guitar in my hand and singing it is in front of an audience.
Who's leading that parade? I mean,
Well, it's probably me in that case,
Devin.
but there's also times where, like, I used to have a duo gig where the whole night we took requests, and we would just look up the lyrics. One person would start playing the chords, and then as long as we knew the song, like
Yeah.
I've heard it before, I would start singing it, and we'd riff off of it, and we would take whatever they said at us, and we would just do that all night. As long as we'd heard the song before,
Yeah.
then we have a musical idea of where to go with it, and we would vamp from there. Because when it comes down to it, the only people who can afford to rehearse a band to death
yeah.
are like big pop artists and things like that, or pretty large acts.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who can afford to sit there and bring in a group and rehearse them and get them to a certain point. And then you also have the groups who like maybe have a really strong local stay,
Yeah.
and they do an act really well. But none of those players might be able to jump outside of the songs that they've learned. Because the idea is that this band has taken a bunch of players who are decent players who, if they're rehearsed well, they can do a show front to bottom. But when you get into the line of players who are playing 5 days or more a week, and they're playing with multiple groups and subbing in and out all the time, what you're looking for is people who could probably listen to the songs on the way there and be decent enough to maybe just be like, hey, is this 1-4-5? And they're like, yeah. And then it has this sub change when you get to this part.
God.
And they're like, okay. And just run and gun it kind of thing.
I mean, how do you deal with the breaks and the leads and the nuances though that make that song? I mean, that's just mind blowing, guys. I mean, you guys are obviously,
They're okay.
you know what I
Songs
mean?
are more formulaic sometimes than people like
songs
to
are
think.
more formulaic, and
Yeah.
in situations like that, if I only have a 4 to 5 day lead time on that, first of all, I'm hoping to hope that the songs they send me I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
And that helps. That helps a lot.
Sure.
Now, if there's a song that I'm like, I don't even know this song. Maybe it's a special dance, or maybe it's a song I've never even heard of before. I am not proud. I'm not proud to the point that I'm going to go make a chart for it. I'm going to go make a chart, and I'm going to stare at my iPad
Nice.
while I play
Nice.
it. And I know there's a lot of people that would give me guff for that, but if you have 4 days of lead time and you still have to learn 3 more hours of music, make the chart, guys. It's It's not 1990 anymore. We've modernized. Obviously, the goal is to memorize your music. Obviously, the goal is to internalize it. But if you have to learn multiple 3-hour sets all within 4 or 5 days, which happens all the time, if you're playing in these corporate groups,
Yeah.
I've been checking my phone all day hoping to get my set list for Saturday. Because of right now, every day that goes by without that, that's a day that I don't have to prepare for whatever might be thrown at me.
Yeah.
So I will most certainly make charts if I feel uncomfortable, because I'd rather play the music correctly than try and go in there with the hubris of like, well, I just memorized it.
No.
It's
that's going to come across. Dude.
And I will say,
that's going to come across to the listener.
I always do
period.
a couple passes on songs, but more important than the passes is what I'll do is first pass is I make a decent chart, and I'll do that for the entire set list. So I'll go through.
What's a chart?
Normally lyrics with chords, maybe some licks written in, anything that I think I won't remember off the top of my head. I want a good go-to for that. And
Like
lyrics
iPad,
for someone.
so
to,
it's
yeah,
in
it's
front
on
of
my
you.
iPad.
Yeah, nice.
And-
Some people still do paper.
Sure.
That'll
But
be
I
my
do
first thing.
iPad.
Is I'll make a chart for every song that I don't know yet. Second pass,
Nice.
I'm going through those songs and trying to play with them without it. And then third pass, I try and see if I can get through the songs without looking at anything. And if I'm lucky, I get 3 passes on each song. Often I don't. So that's why the first pass is if all else fails, I can show up on whatever day it is and I have something to fake through the chart. That's why they call fake books, by the way, is because you can fake a song.
You heard it here first, or
I
second.
make my fake chart to sit there and get through it. And if I'm lucky, I get at least 2 more opportunities to go through that song at a minimum. But the most important thing is, which I don't think enough people always take in consideration, and with modern music, it's so easy, is make yourself a Spotify list. Every song that I'm not familiar with, I put on a list. And when I'm not listening to music for fun, that's what I'm listening to in the car. That's what I'm listening to when I'm falling asleep. That's what I'm listening to when I'm taking a shower. And I listen to these songs all week and really try and internalize them. Because if I can hear the song, it informs the way I play it through it dramatically.
Sure.
Because if I'm just looking at a chord chart and I can't hear the chorus in my head,
Yeah, there's no.
it means almost nothing to me.
Yeah, it's not going to come
Yeah.
across. It'll come across that way too. Guys, very cool. As usual, it's going to have to be a part 2. Love it. Continued successes, guys. Hope you guys have a great trip up north tonight, and keep us posted on where you get booked and when, okay? Everyone, you know where to go. Kruger Trio, right? You got 2024. Look them up. See what they did. See what these conversations and these efforts reaped. Guys, it's been a good one. Another good one.
Yeah, man.
Excellent. All right, peace. We're out.
All right.
This has been Laserlight Presents All About the Gig.